This is Unit 3A-2, Theme 3, Major Battles and Events. We're going to talk a quick timeline here of the Civil War. These are the significant battles of the Civil War. You might be asked questions about these. Let's start at Fort Sumter. This is where Lincoln refused to allow the Confederates to have that southern fort. You can see the picture down here in the bottom right. This is where Fort Sumter is. It's down in Charleston, South Carolina. The Confederates attacked as the fort was being resupplied. Again, this is another clever Lincoln trick. Technically, the South fired first, and actually this is a point of pride in some southern areas that the South started the Civil War by firing at Union troops. The North could then claim that it was simply defending itself by attacking the South. Lincoln called for volunteers to fight the Confederates. This is a big deal because when he called for volunteers, these actually these are the southern border states, we call them the Upper South, decided to join the Confederacy. Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. These border states in yellow kept their slaves, but they stayed loyal to the Union. There's a number of dubious constitutional methods that Lincoln kept them loyal to the Union. For example, martial law in Maryland. We still had some bleeding Kansas situations out in Missouri. But we now have a unified Confederacy at this point. The first major battle of the Civil War is the Battle of Bull Run, also known as the Battle of Manassas. This battle, the first battle of the Bull Run, was just outside of Washington, D.C. The Union thought it was going to be an easy victory. The Confederates, though, put up a huge fight. The Union thought that these were just a bunch of low-class Southern bumpkins that they'd be able to steamroll over with just sheer numbers. But the Confederates put up such a big fight that you can see here in this picture, Union supporters had actually gone to the battlefield to have a picnic and watch, which is kind of creepy to me. But apparently the Union troops were pushed back so far that they actually started to push into those picnickers who had to run for their lives. What this did was prove that this is going to be a long and brutal fight. It's not going to be the quick, easy victory that the Union had thought it was going to be. This also takes us into the Battle of Antietam. Again, it's in the northern South. This is the bloodiest battle of the Civil War, and again, it's a stalemate. This is the first time and one of only two times that the South tried to invade the North, and it was an effort to convince the British that they would be good allies, to try to get the British to ally with the Confederacy. Again, the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. This is the battle that Lincoln used to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. He didn't want the emancipation to appear to be a desperate move to deprive the South of military stuff, that alliance with Britain, but so he waited for at least a stalemate, if not a victory, before he issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This was the battle that allowed that. Then we have the Battle of Vicksburg. This happened about the same time as the Battle of Gettysburg, within a day or two. The Battle of Vicksburg was actually a siege. The Union Army had actually put a siege wall up around, not a wall physically, but a siege around the town of Vicksburg, which was on this strategic point on the Mississippi River. Horrible stories in Vicksburg about people eating whatever they could find, rats and dogs and that fun stuff. This victory at Vicksburg gave the Union control of the Mississippi River, and it finally completed that Anaconda Plan, which had been now 3 years trying to get set up. The victory here led to General Grant's appointment as commander of the Union Army. The Battle of Gettysburg happened within a couple of days of the victory at Vicksburg. This was the desperate second invasion into the North by the Confederacy, again trying for that alliance with the British, trying to prove that they were worthy allies. General Lee lost. It's arguable about why he lost. There is an event known as Pickett's Charge, which failed. But essentially what happens, Lee lost his army. It was decimated. He's forced to retreat back into the South. And from this point on, the war is essentially a war of attrition, with Lee running around trying to keep his army alive. The war is essentially over at this point. This also allows the Gettysburg Address by Lincoln, one of the shortest speeches ever given, only a couple of minutes long, in which Lincoln reaffirmed the goals of the Civil War, and re-energized the American cause of preserving the Union and emancipating the slaves. We also have the Battle of Atlanta, which is part of Sherman's March to the Sea. It starts that march to the sea. Grant established a concept known as total war, in which everything was designed to inflict maximum damage on the South in order to destroy Southern morale. You're not going to be a very good soldier if you're worried that your farm is going to be burned down and your wife is going to be taken away and your kids are going to be sent away. He starts in Atlanta, and then William Tecumseh Sherman leads this march to the sea, which is a 60-mile swath of destruction from Atlanta all the way to Columbia, South Carolina. He burns fields, kills cattle, destroys railroads, burns homes, all that other stuff in order to destroy Southern morale. This helped Lincoln win election, this Battle of Atlanta. It was actually a closer election than what you'd think. Here's our second inauguration. What are the arrows pointing at? Well, this is Abraham Lincoln right here. And this is John Wilkes Booth up here, staring intently at Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth, of course, is going to be the man who assassinates Lincoln very shortly. After the Battle of Gettysburg, we have the Wilderness Campaign. Essentially, Grant is chasing Lee around the South in the wilderness until the siege at Petersburg. I show you this because we are now involved in trench warfare outside of Petersburg. We usually don't think of trench warfare until World War I. But that's what we have at the siege of Petersburg. Lee's army has had a dwindling economic and manpower resources. Morale is awful because of the total war strategy, and really it's only a matter of time until the surrender at Appomattox. Lee surrendered to Grant and essentially ends the Civil War. And then Grant says something amazing. He actually lets the Confederate soldiers go back home, saying that they are now our countrymen again. But the war is over at this point. What are the impacts and outcomes of the Civil War? One, it preserved the United States as a union. Two, it liberated the slaves, which is reaffirmed with the 13th Amendment. Secession, or the idea of secession, was based on the idea that a majority of one region could deny the rights of a minority population and then claim that their minority rights were being violated by the decisions of the nationally elected leadership. We see this over and over and over again in the primary sources. The Confederate leadership saying that the North is trying to take away their minority rights, which is incredibly ironic as they're taking away the rights of African Americans by treating them just as property. More outcomes. Secession is declared as not constitutional. Might makes right, apparently. The secession is not constitutional. The Confederates were defeated on the battlefield. The federal courts ruled that the secession argument was null and void. However, the states' rights issue keeps popping up. In fact, it popped up as late as 2013 when South Carolina House Republicans, essentially mostly Republicans, voted to nullify Obamacare 65-39. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, according to the federal government, once again is a federal law that the South Carolinians tried to nullify based on this idea that of states' rights. This is not the only time. It is popping up occasionally, and it's not always a conservative idea, but we'll get into that later when we talk about the civil rights movement. Next, we're going to be moving into Unit 3B, so stay tuned.